All right. Let me know if sound is working all right. I don't know. I'll probably open this up a lot earlier than usual because I don't think I have some big monologue to talk about. Yes, PVK. Sorry, I am late. And even cut some of the things I was doing short. So, what are you going to do? So I've been thinking of a number of things. Still thinking about the my post hell live streams, and Jacob is keeping it very fresh in my memory because he just did another stream on it, which I posted to my channel, like in the community things. What is it called? It's called just like Universalism Must Die or something. And it's a great, I don't know, it's great. Like part of my goal is just to have people talking about it because I think that's part of how a lot of people think. It reminds me of that Jordan Peterson clip where he said, he talks about what is thinking, and to some degree, there are people who probably need other people to be able to think at all. To some degree, I mean, we all do at some level, but there are definitely people who I think it's possible to think on your own, but Peterson talks about how you need to kind of separate yourself, at least imaginally, into two different interlocutors. And I think in order to really think, you have to be open to the truth outside the truth you apprehend. And so you actually have to have a meaningful dialogue inside yourself to discern what you think. And but a lot of people, I think, need that, do that through talking to other people. Yeah, universalism must die. Look at him, you little cutie. Jacob, not Hebrew Bible study. Universalism must die. And there's a lot of great comments. I tried to leave a lot of comments about on all the points where they brought up universalist things, because he was mainly just interacting with people who, Andrew was in there, and then Kirk was in there. And I don't think, like, you need to talk to somebody who actually holds the position in order to most times it's so difficult. Sorry, I'm not picking my nose. I just have I have a straight edge razor, and I hadn't used it forever because it takes time, because I'm not good at it and I don't want to just like destroy myself. And so I hadn't used it in a long time, and I had some time the other day, and so I did it, but now I have all these little scabs everywhere. But it's exceedingly rare for someone to present and defend a position that they don't personally hold to, because you're just I don't know. I think it takes a really huge imagination. That's a Graham Greene quote that I love, which is hate is a lack of imagination. And hate, even of an idea, is a lack of imagination. Which is why, God, I was telling my wife this the other night. Cal, I'm going to love you up. I'm going to love on you. My friend, Kalia Rivet, Wesley Curry II, who's popped onto a live stream before, and I don't know if he's reached out to Mark. He was maybe going to reach out to Mark or Cal to have kind of a randos and just talk more at length about the things that interest him, which are kind of revelations, apocalyptic, kind of end time stuff. Because Wesley has some ideas about that happened in the end of one of my streams the other day. And I was having a private conversation with Jason and Cal. And this is why Cal, because I was mentioning it to my wife, and she was like, yeah, I don't know. It's maybe sounding a bit like on the spectrum towards schizotypal, I suppose. And what I love so much about Cal is Cal was, I don't even know if it was steel manning, but he was I don't know. What's the simplest way to say it? Cal, more than almost anyone I know, really tries to see people and to truly not judge them, to really take what they're saying. Like, what does Cal say? God sees the person as if they're the only ones that exist. And I think Cal, and God bless him, if he truly believes that, and then he believes that he is meant to be like God in that regard, to also see people as if they're the only ones that exist, he just agapes the hell out of them. And that's probably the proper way to say it. Agapeing the hell out of them. And he was just, I wish I could repeat all the things that he was saying about Wesley, but he was just really trying to see the world as Wesley sees it and almost steelman him and just be charitable with what he's saying and seeing and see the truth. Because I'll often say that whenever you're interacting with someone, you should see the truth of what they're talking about, the seed of truth that's in whatever they're saying, even if they're not saying it as well as they could, to the absolute best of your ability. It's to be an active listener and to love properly. And Cal did that so beautifully. Jason had a lot of great comments on that hell stream. But let me fulfill my title. And I don't know. I don't know if this is just my lot in life. What does my friend call it? There's some Russian word that my buddy, a local deacon friend of mine, shared with me. It's a very Orthodox thing. If there's other Orthodox in the chat, and you know this, I know Jeremy's here. Jeremy knows a lot of facts about Orthodoxy. But my buddy told me that, like, maybe me feeling compelled to talk to Protestants and a diverse array of people who disagree with me about theological topics is my own personal. The word is, like, it's something that is required for your own salvation. And, like, everybody has their own little particular things, their own particular cross to bear, perhaps. But I don't know what the Russian word for it is. And so maybe that's it. I don't know. Like, I was saying this to my wife the other day. I don't know how to be in the world other than I am, really. I'm always trying to be the best version of myself, but it's because I was talking to her then in light of that Wesley Curry stuff. I'm getting to the title, and I was just saying how it's and then we were talking about Paul talking to Nathan Jacobs, and Orthodoxy in America, and then I was saying the very Pageauian idea, but I think it's very true. It's very in line with Vervaeke's 4 P's of knowing, I think, but it's that you can't really understand something, at least fully, from the outside without initiation. Because even if you think about the 4 P's of knowing, right? Propositional, participatory, perspectival, and procedural. Are those all of them? Participatory and procedural are definitely only had by initiation. So you have to actually engage in the practices. And then arguably the perspectival is also through initiation. And then I would argue you need all those things to probably even accurately understand the propositional. And so truly, like, you can only know something from the inside. It's real. Life is not tried, it is merely survived if you're standing outside the fire. You got to get in the fire, man. Garth Brooks. And so even when it comes to other persons, like, I was saying this with my wife, because we had some miscommunication issues lately, and just we're very different people. And I was just saying to her, like, it's impossible for me to know what it's like to be you. Well, I mean, maybe it's not impossible, but it is exceedingly hard. It requires a lot of kenosis, a lot of self-emptying, a lot of not insisting on your own way, a lot of not projecting your own way of seeing the world onto the other person, because we all see the world to degrees differently, in different ways. We are initiated into the world in our own particular ways, which is probably why you can't really judge anyone, because you don't know what it's like to be them. Because if you knew what it was like to be them completely, this is kind of one of Cal's big arguments for non-judgment, you would be them. And to judge them is to essentially say, if I were you, I wouldn't have done X, or I wouldn't have done this. But if you were them and you had all the constraints of their being, their body, their mind, their experiences, their parents, their family, if you were initiated exactly as they were, you would be them. And maybe that's why St. Paul says, I don't judge anyone. I indeed don't judge myself. Now, I don't want to. I was going to dive back into the hell topic, but I mean, whatever. If you're interested in that, you can go look into it yourself. Go look at the comments in Jacob's stream and watch the parts where he talks about it. Jason has some excellent comments in there, and I was just thinking that. So my way of being in the world, at least so far, which doesn't mean it's static, Rod. Doesn't mean it's like I'm bound and determined by this. It doesn't mean that I can't change, because you can, So like my personality, my temperament, my wiring, my upbringing, all of those things influence you. And in a sense, like I can't change the facts of any of that. But that's my saying that I like so much that I've come up with recently. I really do like this. I think it's good. Is that the facts of reality don't change, but the meaning can change. The meaning of the facts can change. And I think that's the flip from an objectivist way of perceiving the world within the subjective objective divide and trying to be objective about everything, which is to treat everything and all facts and all matter as objects, objectifying it all. So you remove the perceiver from it, but then you have the hard problem of all perception, which is the perceiver. How does the perceiver affect all of that? But like the meaning crisis and nihilism and meaning has to do with the person. So when you reinsert the person, the meaning of the facts can change. Like if we're dealing in the realm of meaning, then facts matter. They're not irrelevant, but the meaning of the facts is what you're concerned with, because the facts in and of themselves are meaningless. The person, the person is what awakens the meaning of the facts. And so the person is central. That's why the person is the nexus and the locus of all meaning. So I'm not bound by all my particular the facts about me necessarily. I mean, well, I am and I am not. Like, again, like the meaning of that can change as I grow and evolve and have transformed. But so to my title, for whatever reason, in the course of my life, I have simultaneously resonated with people. I've had good friendships, good relationships with a number of people, but I've always been like when I got together with my priest the other day, he was saying, you're just a contrarian, and I think he sees himself as a contrarian too. So I mean, he wasn't saying that as a negative. He was just saying, I tend to I focus on I tend to focus on difference rather than unity, because I think that's where a lot of gold is to be mined, where we are different. It's probably why I like Peter Rollins and the Church of the Contradiction. And but the problem with focusing on difference and seeing, it's like those old puzzles or like tests when you were a kid and you're like, which of these four does not belong, which is different, like that's how my mind is. Like I tend to just see those things. What is different? And I tend to push on difference. And like I was telling my priest, I was like, you put me in a room full of universalists and I'll be the fly in the ointment. I'll be the weirdo out. I'll be the one who's like pushing all the universalists. It's just how I am. But it is not, it's the way that I have so far been in the world. and it is how I tend to manifest myself, but it is not equivalent to the essence of who I am, Rod. And so that's the woe to you when people speak well of you, right? Jesus says this to the Pharisees in Luke 6:26. I remember this because Derek Webb used to quote it once. And there's there's a degree to which you can be I don't know, there's a kind of person who you'll see this a lot in the modern world and social media and whatever, who is just, you are I think there's a difference. There's a distinction between woe to you and people speak well of you. So Jesus is saying, like, if you're just a yes man, if you just always do what people expect and give people what they want, you're probably not being true and authentic to yourself, to who you really are, or to God for that matter. You're probably not speaking truth. If, like, there's all those Orwell quotes, like, I have a ton of them saved on my phone, but because 1984 is a huge book for me. No. I feel like there's a ton of great Orwell quotes that I'm just forgetting right now. I want to find one though. Sorry, folks. Quotes. Yeah. Truth. It's the new hate speech. During times of universal deceit, telling the truth becomes a revolutionary act. Or, he has all the doublespeak things. War is peace. Slavery is freedom. If liberty means anything at all, it means the right to tell people what they do not want to hear. And, there's wisdom in that, and there's discernment in that, because also at the same time, there's maybe not a lot of point or utility or wisdom in angrily and aggressively saying things to people who don't want to listen, because I don't know, like, it's not good to be a contrarian just to be a contrarian. Like, being a contrarian isn't a good in and of itself. It's a particular way of being in the world, and because you can be right and be wrong, or be wrong and be right, you can probably be a contrarian and be very wrong about it, and you can be adjectivally wrong about it, because being a contrarian is just adverbial. I mean, being a contrarian is just it's an adjective. That person is well, this is a noun, a contrarian, but like, to be a contradictory person, there you go, that's an adjective, that's just an adjective. But if you act contrarianly, like, that's fine, maybe, but it depends on the situation, because everything is contextual. It depends. In the same way, being a yes man is not always great. It depends on what the goal is. If you are in if you're in like a sinking ship and no one knows and the captain doesn't know, like, being a yes man, I don't know, that's a terrible illustration, but I mean, you get my point. So that's the woe to you when people speak well of you. Like, if you're let's say you're in a church or an institution or a family that's like heading for a cliff, and it's just like, everybody like the ride? Should we just keep going? And you're like, yeah. It's probably a bad idea. So that's woe to you when everyone speaks well of you. But then it's simultaneously Romans 12, so far as it depends on you, live at peace with all men. What do you do with that? What do you do with, like, live peaceably with everyone in as much as you can, and woe to you when everyone speaks well of you? Like, those seem to be contradictory things, or things are at tension. I think what that means is a very Jordan Peterson thing, or very Dostoevsky. Speak the truth, especially to yourself, and let the cards fall where they may. Which is very in line with all the stuff that I've been saying, like with Saint Maximus. It's my pushback to, I guess this is maybe where I'll close it out, because I'll two things I want to bring up is the Western civilization is already dead. Paul Kingsnorth conversation with Peugeot. So Paul Kingsnorth had that conversation, like the end of Christian civilization or something, that he did a First Things Foundation. And then I think Peugeot and Kings North must talk off the air, to some degree, or email. And so Peugeot had him on recently to talk about that again in more depth. And it's great. I love Kings North, but it's funny. I have a lot of friends who don't really like Kings North. Like I'm in a group chat with Sam and Trip and Sarah, and like Trip and Sam are just like, Kings North's wrong, and Kings North annoys them. And they think Kings North has too hard of a binary between the machine and civilization, and he's too much of an extremist, and they think that he's importing his old kind of pagan environmentalism into his Christianity. And I'm over here thinking like, that's kind of what I've always thought, and I've always been on that. I've always thought that just is synonymous with Christianity. I've never been a pagan. I've never been outside of Christianity, and basically, except when I was. And I've always had an opinion very similar to Kings North about all this. Like, essentially, all his stuff with the machine is like the book I was going to write a long time ago, Technological Babble. It's like essentially all the same stuff. And everything he says in that video, I mean, for the most part, I think it's just awesome. I think it's fantastic. Peugeot has good pushbacks, but what Kings North says in there is awesome. And it pisses people off. People don't like it. And I just think like, okay, well, like what you see in here depends a lot upon where you're standing or the kind of person you are. People will see Kings North, and is he being a woe to you when everyone speaks well of you? And so he's being faithful to that kind of inverted or implied commandment of Jesus, which is speak the truth, speak it as you see it, like don't deny your conscience. I think those are all different ways to say that. Don't just tell people what they want to hear. Is that what Kings North is doing? Or is he not doing what he could to live at peace with all men, to not say things that instigate or trigger or that are controversial? Is it a good in and of itself to say controversial things? Not necessarily, but like it's maybe good to shout fire in a burning room. So like, which is Kings North doing? And it depends on where you're standing and what you see. Like, if you think Kings North is full of shit with all that he's saying about civilization, and the machine and technology, and specifically, like, Kings North isn't denying in their building things and humans building things. It's about the nature of the things built. Are the things built? And this is where, again, I'll talk about that book, Technology and the Modern Human, I think, by Craig Gay. It's a great book, but he distinguishes in there the difference in techne between a contrivance and then machine tech, which I think Kings North would be fully on board with that book. And a contrivance is a kind of technology, but it's a kind of technology that is necessarily limited by and connected to nature. So like a windmill. Not like the huge giant windmills that are made with petroleum and metal and all that shit. Like, that's machine tech, masquerading, I think, as environmentally harmonious tech. Like, because debatably it's not. But like, if you just build like a windmill out of wood or a water wheel, old school, like, think tech from over 100 years ago. Like, a lot of that technology is it's humans building things, but it's not stuff that is out of sync and whatever. I'm already hearing all the arguments back and forth. And what about medieval times? And do you want a medieval dentist? And I don't know. There's a lot of Christians that I think are connected to aspects of Christian empire that I don't agree with, because being a Christian anarchist, I don't, and I tend to like the Anabaptist kind of mode with this, and I tend to be a weird Orthodox. Even though I think Christ can pervade even that, because look at me, I'm live streaming. I think there are a lot of negative aspects about it. Like, I don't think you should necessarily prescribe it, but in the same token, I think even though not all roads lead to God, God will meet you on any road. And so it requires wisdom and discernment, and a lot of it has to do with scale. So that's the last thing I'll talk about, maybe, is the Paul conversation, one of the things where I disagreed with Nathan Jacobs, I thought he said a lot of great stuff in that talk, the Nathan Jacobs conversation with Paul. But one of the things he talked about was it's maybe just a word thing, but he talked about scale, and he said, I hope orthodoxy in America can scale. And that's why I bring in that Jordan Hall distinction, I think, that he made with Christian Baxter on scale and growth. Like scale and growth are different things. Scale is connected to the machine and it's exponential, which is exactly in line with Craig Gay and that book, Technology and the Future of the Human, in the Human Future. I can't forget exactly what it is. And then growth, which is slow. You know, the growth of a body is slow, you know, unless it's like a cancer. And it tends to have painful transformations a little bit, you know, like there's a kind of suffering that's involved with slow human growth. And like something, I mean, like, I don't like it a lot of times. Like these are private conversations that I have where I don't, oh, this is the last thing I want to talk about. No, shut up and open this up. But like, so my wife and I started watching this show on, I think it's Showtime. You can maybe get it through Paramount Plus. I can't remember, but it's through Apple TV. I can't keep track of all that crap. And but it's called Couples Therapy. And it's basically all these different couples that go to this psychoanalyst and they just talk about their marriages and stuff. And it's so fascinating, man. I love it because I love therapy, but it's interesting to me to watch it. So now we've watched about 4 episodes and you watch all these couples and they come and they go and it's at different times in either it's almost like the movie Blue Valentine, Ryan Gosling, I love you. Where Blue Valentine is like this horrible movie about essentially like the destruction and the fall of a marriage. And it just shows it like it shows the beginning, it shows them falling in love, and then it shows like the end, and it's just horrific. But this couples therapy thing, hey, C-Bax, I'm just finishing out my thought here. This couples therapy thing is you sit there and watch it, 4 episodes, and I was telling my wife, isn't it amazing how much you're just like, oh, that guy, you watch the first episode and you're like, that guy's the problem. Like he's got issues. And then you'll watch the next episode and you're like, oh, wait a minute. Like now I totally see him in a new light and I can see where he's coming from and some of his backstory and what's going on. I can see like where he is. And now I can see where like his wife isn't hearing him. And I've probably gone back and forth with every person in that show, in the couple, 2 or 3 times, flipping back and forth of like, with judgments of like, they're the problem. No, they're the problem. No, they're the problem. No, they're the problem. And I'm just like, what all that shows me is just like, probably back to Cal's thing and non-judgment is just like, when it comes to everyone and judgment, including myself, it probably all comes back to like, we just don't know as we ought to know. It's that 1 Corinthians 8 thing. And if we really knew fully, if you could really see someone and agape the hell out of them, you wouldn't judge them. And you would forgive them. And that would probably be the ushering into the eschaton. Hey, C-Bax.
What about discernment and wolves in sheep's clothing? Don't cast your pearls before swine.
Yeah, I think those are all super. Were those things you were thinking as I was talking?
Those are things Jesus said.
For sure. But they're obviously stuff that came up for you.
Yeah, like, you know, because, I mean, I think that's the tension of, because it's like, don't judge lest ye be judged. And then immediately after it says, and you must be discerning as serpents. And so the difference between judgment and discernment.
Yeah.
And then, like, what does it mean to not cast your pearls before swine? Like, you have to make it like, what is, that makes me think of like Brene Brown's thing about like what is vulnerable and the difference between vulnerability and intimacy or something like that. I don't know.
What does she say?
Like, being vulnerable is cheering from a place of healing, but like what is intimate is, I don't remember the exact, something about sharing from a place of healing is like, okay. But like, if you're sharing things that are like raw and undealt with or something, that it's probably not wise. So, yeah, those are kind of the thoughts. Go for it. It's been a while since I.
No, that's good. And then what do you think is the difference between, like, just tell me more. I mean, I have thoughts obviously on all those things that you brought up, like casting your pearls before swine. I don't think I'm very damn good at it. I think I love casting pearls before swine. I think it's like
Well, and that was
sometimes
what came up
stupid
in the
about, like, it's
comments.
James 4.
What came up in the comments is that we're the swine, and that we're the wolves, and I kind of, which is like a really, total depravity way to look at yourself. Not a very like theosis way to look, because I don't think like, I don't know. But then there is the flip side of like approaching life humbly at the same time. So, but those take an element of discernment or something like that.
Yeah, we got some other people coming in. Sorry, my computer's slow. Let me read about Brene Brown. So, she says that
Brene
vulnerability
Brown.
is the key to intimacy. She says that vulnerability is the foundation of all types of intimacy, including physical, emotional, and spiritual. So vulnerability is the capacity to be open and honest about your feelings, needs, and fears. It involves being emotionally exposed and taking a risk. Yeah, it takes a lot of, I don't know. And intimacy is the willingness to be vulnerable with someone. It's the quality that makes relationships last.
And I may be missing one of the words that she used.
Huh?
I can't remember the exact quote.
She says that people often avoid vulnerability because they're afraid of being rejected. However, she says that vulnerability is essential for building deep and meaningful connections. I mean, I see that as being true. But then what's funny is, like, I was just talking to my wife last night as we were working through something and having some struggles. And I said, this is something that's come up a lot. I don't know. I need to talk to Rod more about it. And you guys can tell me what you think about it. I don't really think women, this seems like one of those modern gender things, sex wars, is that women, I think, want a certain kind of like emotional, vulnerable man who talks about his feelings. Like, they think they want that, but I don't think they actually do. Like, this is stuff Tripp would say a lot. Sam, you know what I'm talking about.
I mean, I think they want someone who will listen to them talk about their feelings.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's true.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. I should probably mute. But anyway, I wanted to ask about the concept of trust, and like the seeming necessity. And I mean, as you're talking about vulnerability and intimacy, trust is certainly an ingredient that is necessary for those things. As you relate that to sort of grand purpose, maybe even like love God, love your neighbor level. I mean, intentionally, that's where I'm most interested. What is the utility of it in like most simple terms that you can think of? Like, let's say that we had, and I'm acknowledging we don't, we have some trust that we can afford each other in a certain sense, more so because we're doing it in a non-physical realm, right? Like you can't punch me in the face if I say something that offends you. But let's say that you had maximal trust. This is a relationship with your best friend or your wife. What is the proper use of that in a way that um, that is like being a good steward of this amazing gift you've been given? Holy smokes, I've got all these trusting relationships. We could do something, but how do you put that in a way that is righteous and not sort of the odd side of ambition that is us trying to do something?
It's my the answer is love.
You,
Like,
Alan, I think he was asking you.
Yeah, I know. I'm probably the only one who has an answer to this question. So, and I don't think anyone else wants to speak during this live stream. So, no, it's just love. It's just like willing what is best for the other person, and then having humility about how strong you are in your ability to discern that. Like, I don't know all things for all people, what's the best for them. But yeah, like if you say like it is, if you have a child, you have to say like what's good for that child and then try and do that, but you also have to have humility of like, you don't know all things and you can't protect them from all things. you know. And speaking of people who are about to answer that question about how to love your child, here's Chad the girl dad.
Hey there. Oh, I was thinking. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I hate to add even more to it, but I guess for clarity, um, the idea that there's the knowing and being known, and that increases capacity to relate, to work together in a way that intentionally and beneficially takes each other for granted. Like we can know the whatever that is, we can expect certain things in the relationship in a healthy way. Um, Maybe the only way to get at it is to point out the ways that it's not done right. Like what are the things to steer clear of in that? Like, because I can't remember if it was in this stream or not, but there was some reference to the idea that like you could end up drinking Kool-Aid if you like mismanage that trust.
Yeah, I would say something along the lines of there's sometimes this and the conversation I had with Rigel Thurston, we talked about community building, and he said like there's stages of community building where there's this initial like, oh, we kind of trust. There's like a very superficial trust of, oh, we're gathering around, like we've both followed these corners, and Paul, like, okay, there's this surface level, but then maybe the trust is like that. You go to a level deeper over some time, and it's like, oh, well, that person kind of, oh, that was rude, or that kind of took me off guard or something like that. And then like trust is built over time. And in the digital space, like through certain levels of prophilicity, I think that allow for patterns to be seen. And is the pattern kind of one of, well, this person's actually never wrong, or this person actually asked for forgiveness, and those things like build trust over time. Or this there was conflict, and the conflict was able to be resolved through, maybe it was offline or online. But as far as like in this space, I think time is a very important part of trust, and because say it's broken, it takes longer to rebuild. And the other side of it is sometimes there's this tendency to be like, man, we're all Christians now. Like, I don't know if y'all have ever encountered this culture. It's like, oh, so this is the body of Christ, and you could tell a complete stranger, something, and because we're all Christians here. Like, I don't know if you've ever been in a situation like that, but there's a little bit of that, and I think that's where the discerning side, and where, when Christ is talking about what does it mean that there are actually wolves, or, gossips, or people with agendas, or people, so I don't know. That's how I feel about it. Shane.
Hey, Luke.
Hey, oh, go ahead.
Luke.
What up?
You hear me?
Yep.
Okay. I've been watching you. I subscribed to your channel a little while back. Just today, I wanted to ask one question, and I'll get out of here.
Okay.
The thing with like you were talking about being contrarian,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then you're also talking about church, right?
Mm-hmm.
So obviously, you might be contrarian, but obviously the church must play an important part in your life,
Mm-hmm.
right? You were talking to a priest. So
Yeah.
I guess the only question I have, and it relates to trust, all right? Ultimately, when you're making a decision on something in your life, do you submit to the authority of the church, or do you actually trust in your own judgment fully? Because I know for me, I mean, just again speaking for only myself, and I don't think there's a right and wrong, but I don't ever seek the advice of a church or a God or any of that. I'm an atheist. So
Mhm.
all I do is consider my own judgment on a situation. So I'm just curious. I mean, ultimately, I would be my own God, so to say, right? Because I'm making that decision for myself. All right. Do you make decisions for yourself, or do you seek other people or institutions to make those decisions for you? And that's my only question.
The ultimate priesthood of the believer.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to give you a question you're probably not going to like, which is yes.
It's okay. I'll answer the best I can.
Yeah. So my answer to that would be yes. So like somebody asked me the other day, and I brought this up with my priest the last time I got together with him, of like, what would you do if your priest or the Orthodox Church or something got to the place of like, just said like, Luke, you shouldn't talk about universalism, or you shouldn't do whatever. And I don't know if I know how to answer that necessarily, because I have I have two convictions about things that I think are, they seem like they're in tension, and they are, but I don't actually, but I think that they have a higher unity that's above the tension, which is like my own personal conscience, and then what is perceived, that is the teaching of the authority of the church and what that means. And like when I brought this up to my priest, I said, I brought up that somebody had asked me that question, and I said, it's a little interesting to me, because my understanding in Orthodoxy is not that there's not some kind of like broad position on it. Like they maybe have a position where it's not advised for priests to speak about any particular thing from the pulpit, which I think has been a lot of my pushback on universalism, or even that's a lot of what Jacob was saying in his stream, which I think is probably true if you're trying to absolutize an opinion on something. But like I don't know. Here's the thing, Lou, where I'll agree with you. I don't think that it's possible to say that if like I have an opinion about something and the church would have a different opinion, could you submit to their authority? Well, you could, in a sense. You could just say like, I am not going to insist on my own way and to keep saying the thing that you don't want me to say. But that doesn't change your opinion. Your opinion is still what it is. Like you can either shut up about it,
Right.
which could be submission, but you can't change it, because you are.
I do think you're going to have the same opinion regardless, but your opinion gets squashed in the way it seems to me. Like if I make a decision to do something and to share my honest thoughts, but I have to submit to an authority, it's kind of like my opinions and thoughts get squashed by the authority above me. See, I know this is weird to Christians, I think. I don't have any authority. I'm my own authority. I don't go to anyone to ask to do. I'm serious. I really mean that.
I believe that you're being earnest, but I don't know. I don't know that is completely true. This is the way I'll frame it. This is the last thing I'll say, and I'll see what other people have to say. I think a lot of this has to do with self-control. So there's this sermon that I posted in my community stuff recently by Chris Green that is excellent. And he essentially said in there, about 3/4 of the way, he worked his way there, but he said kind of like the pinnacle of Christian virtue has to do with self-control. And self-control is a little bit of a paradox. What the hell does that mean? Self-control. What part of the self is controlling the self? Like that seems to be, there's some kind of unity among like a split, internal split. Because there's part of you that clearly wants to do something, but there's another part of you that doesn't, hence self-control. And that's what, and I think within the Christian frame, or you could even say it within like a family. If a child, I've said this a lot before, but like my son, if he's hitting his sisters and I tell him not to, and he just submits to that authority when he's young, even though he doesn't want to, and he's angry and he's resentful about it, and he's only doing it because I tell him to, and he fears my authority and that I might discipline him somehow. That's not the goal that I want. That's maybe a step towards the goal, but it's not the goal. What I want him to do is to trust me and to obey me and to do what I want, because I have a wisdom that he doesn't yet understand. And ultimately I want him to not want to hit his sister.
Right.
Like that's different than just like a mere submission. That's a different thing.
And I'm trying to relate I
Yeah.
really am. I'm trying to relate and see a difference that I'm looking at when I, watch Christian men talk about how their decision-making processes, right? A lot of times I'll hear, well, I'll go pray about it, right? And I don't have a problem with that, but I see it as a difference. Like for me, I don't pray about anything. All right. If I have a decision to make, I don't go to other men to tell me what to do. All right. I literally, and I don't even have like too many relationships with other men. I mean, I'm pretty much alone in life. All right. So it's not like I have this council of people to throw my ideas off of, right? All right. I just
You
make
do right
decisions
now.
on myself by myself. That's all I do. All right.
Is that is that
but
by
I
your own
trust
choice? You want it that
I
way?
trust those. I trust my decisions. I'm not making them wondering if I'm making the right decision or not. I could make wrong decisions. I have made wrong decisions, but I trust fully the decision I'm going to make just based on rational thought. All right. Where I think it seems like the Christian mindset is you go to a God who's going to then inform you, or you go to the priest who's going to inform you, or a bunch of men who are going to inform you. Now, I could be wrong, and that's why I'm just throwing it out there, right? Because I don't do any of that. I just make a decision, and I live with the decision. Right? And my ultimate authority, and I sincerely say this, and Christians, can get mad at this, when I talk online with people. I make my own decision. So in that way, I don't believe I'm a God, a supernatural, but in that way, I am my own God. I make my own choices. All right. And I'm just wondering, do you submit your thoughts to something else, whether it be a God or other men? And that was basically my question. And I'm gonna shut up now and maybe listen, and that's it.
Okay, one more quick thing. I'll say this in like under a few seconds. Even if I were to submit myself to some other thoughts, who's doing that? I'm doing that. I'm making that choice. So ultimately,
Yeah.
it's the thing that I most value because I'm doing it.
Yeah, no, I know that
So
you're
the two
making
are
that
one
choice.
then.
Yeah, but it's a choice I'm not making. We're just making different choices, right? All right. But yeah, I understand that you're choosing. If you're doing that, you're choosing to do that. All right. I don't make that choice. I trust myself.
Sure.
And that's it.
Sure.
Can I tackle a little bit of this?
Yeah, hit it.
Oh, welcome, Lou. Pleasure to meet you.
Hey.
Yeah, I think, I don't think I'm essentially different than you are at all. For like 99.9% of my life, I think the decisions I make today, a lot of them are informed by past experience and relationship, all these different stacks of experiences. And like I'm not like, for instance, here's a good example. So like I had this job opportunity that scared the shit out of me. I'm like, I don't know, man. I didn't see it as a job opportunity. And in fact, I thought it was probably the opposite of an opportunity. But I had something within me. I don't know if it's consciousness or whatever. Who the fuck knows? Was I had a very strong thought that perhaps it was God. I don't know how to describe that thing, but it was like, every time that you ran up against something that was difficult, sometimes there was something that caused a tremendous fear in me that would either hold me back so I didn't get hurt. And then sometimes when I've actually made the approach and actually walked through and did the thing, something incredible has happened on the other side of that. And so that's why, like, I had this job opportunity. I had a lot of fear around the job because I didn't have certain experience. And so whatever that feeling was, that, yeah, Sherry says a still small voice, whatever the fuck that is, I listened to it, and it turned out to be far greater of an opportunity than I could have imagined. So is that listening to the authority of God, I don't know. But what I do have, like when I am consciously going into prayer or some sort of practice or meditation, I guess for me, one of the things is it helps me in my relationship with other people as I move throughout the day in my daily life. And so it's nice to have kind of like this little spot that I can just kind of get into some sort of disciplined practice. So I'm really pragmatic with that. I also have a deep understanding that's far deeper than just pragmatic. So there's shit about it that I don't get and I don't understand, but I really don't have to because I just have an experience with it. Now, I would say, like, if somebody in your position, if you're not having any difficulty, then fuck, that's great. Like, it's working out for you. Badass, dude.
It's worked for about 12 years.
Yeah. So, like, that works, then work it, dude. I mean,
no, I don't have an insecurity at all.
Right.
I just was curious of how people who do believe in God and do believe in, the counsel of wisdom amongst other people and all that. I just wonder how they negotiated. Because personally, I don't struggle with it. I make firm decisions and that's it. And I'm content. And I personally find it easier now as an atheist. When I was a Christian, because I was most of my life a Christian, I used to, pray about things. All right, let me stop. I don't want to make a decision. I want to think about it carefully. I want to pray and then get some sort of a feeling like you maybe described, a contentment that I attribute to God. All right. And then make a decision, where now I find myself being more clear and concise in my decisions and not at all thinking that they could be perfect. All right. That's not what I'm even seeking. All right. I think maybe as a Christian, I was seeking more of a perfection. All right. Now I'm not. I'm just making decisions to the best of my ability and letting it go. And when I make a choice, biblically, I guess says, let your yes be yes and your no be no. All right. It's like, when I make a decision, that's it. It's like I move on and that's the end of it. Right.
Yeah. So like a lot of the Christianity, like that, becoming Christian over the last couple of years for me, I did notice that it causes a lot more difficulty for me to make, try and discern like who is right, whatever. And so like the more I get caught up in that shit, the more I feel separated from God. But I think generally for me, like a guy like me, like I need to be grounded. And so what I found is a lot more, although it can be confusing and a pain in the ass oftentimes, other times, especially when I'm in a relationship with my fellows here, I can find a lot of, like, there's a security there in, so it's like this ineffable type of security that helps me feel connected across, just across the way. So, yeah, I think that's for me. I mean, because honestly, and also I feel compelled. Like, that's the other thing. I feel compelled. Like, I don't think I could in good consciousness just turn my back on God. I mean, in theory, it makes a lot of sense that I'd just be like, well, fuck all this because you guys are fucking whack and I feel like crazy, but I can't just do it. Like, it's weird. So,
well, it's a weird place to come to when you turn your back on God, right? It is definitely something that people, I think, can struggle with. They might have trauma, all right? And it can be traumatic, all right? So it definitely has something a person has to go through, all right?
All right,
on the other side of it, once you go through the traumatic thing, all right, there seems for me, and again, I only speak for myself, but for me, it's much more clear, all right? My mind is more free and clear because I'm not seeking to appease other people. All right. Now I take into account people I love, et cetera, and I'm not being cold, but once I decide something, it's just done and solid. I don't think about, well, what does God think about it, right? Because that used to be a thing that I could contemplate for months on end. At least for me, when I was a Christian, I could contemplate, for months on end. What does God think? God, please show me something that I know I'm making the right decision. Whereas now I have more confidence in my decisions. Again, I don't have insecurity in my decisions. I make a decision, it's final, and I feel good about it. All right. I feel I've thought it through. I feel I've done the best I can with the decision. And I just feel more comfortable. And I wonder, I will say I'm my own God, in that way. But when I wasn't my own God, I found it more complicated. And that's all. I mean, I know this is amongst Christian people, this is crazy, right?
No,
It can be crazy to a Christian person to try to understand what it's like not to trust in a God at all, right? But there's another side. If you talk to probably people like me who don't believe in God, I think you'll find a lot of them have good lives, right? And I'm sure some have horrible lives, because whether you believe in a God or don't believe in a God, your life can be horrible or good. Doesn't matter, right? Christians suffer trauma. Atheists suffer trauma. Everyone is dealing with things in their lives, regardless of what they believe, right? But, ultimately, when I have found that not believing in God has helped me mentally, all right? And that's, I guess, from a secular perspective, right? But it's helped me mentally to become a stronger man. All right. Because
all right, I wanna bring in Riel and SE Money, just because they've been in here for a while and they haven't gotten to say anything.
By the way, I'm gonna go, but I'm gonna listen. All right.
Okay.
Thank you, Lou.
We'll have to talk more later. I have more questions for you too.
And I appreciate you.
All right. See you, buddy. Thanks for coming.
All right.
Rigel.
Hey, Luke. Hey,
What
Christian. Hey, SE Money. Comer.
Yeah, screw you, Alan.
Oh, Alan. Sorry.
No, that's all right.
Oh,
He's going with the brand versus his name. His name's just tiny.
yeah.
Go with both.
That's very.
That's
Yeah.
right. What do you guys think? I think a lot of things about old Lou. I'm glad he's here, but go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I was like browsing on YouTube, and then I saw this live stream roll up, and I hit unmute, and then Christian mentioned my name, and I was like, well, maybe I need to, jump in on this.
The algo speaks.
But my initial reaction is, I love this question because it kind of stings me a little bit. This is one that I've kind of been avoiding, I think. And Luke, I remember someone asking it of you during the Universalism conversation, and I was like, ooh, how's he going to answer this? So I appreciate just Lou's tenacity in making sure that we actually discuss this question, because I've never really thought through it very clearly. But what comes up for me is this idea of positive polarity, where you have two positive poles that can both become pathological if I over-identify with one side or the other. So in this case, I'm thinking in terms of express self and sacrifice self as two positive parts of being a human that can become pathological if I over-identify with one or the other. And this idea of either relying on my own understanding completely or relying on the church's understanding completely creates prisons. You know, I almost like map this to the prodigal son and the older brother. Like they're both can create their own little systems of control and stagnation. And the way I'm just trying to consider bringing these both of these poles together into tension with each other. And that's where I know just experientially that I'm, at least I think I'm on the right track, is when both are kind of pulling against each other or pushing against each other in my life. That's when I have more confidence. Now, I totally get where he's coming from, though. I mean, being able to just make your own decisions and not constantly be wrestling with like the will of God in my life is very freeing. And I think I've been through that, stage, if you will, in my life. Anyways, those are my like little smattering of thoughts.
Yeah, that's great. That's good. SE Money. Sorry, I forget your actual name. I'll just call you by
That works.
your handle.
Yeah. What's up, guys?
Hey.
I got in here because I really liked the title. I thought that was a really interesting thing, and I wanted to see if I could project some of my own philosophical interpretation onto that.
Would love
Part of what
to
I
hear.
do is try to interpret things in a lot of different ways, and I'm not necessarily saying this is the way to look at it, but just one way to see it. Woe to you when everyone speaks well of you. And something about that seems to be like when people speak well of you, that seems to feed your ego. That seems to encourage a prideful spirit that then seems to lead you astray down a sinful path of assumptions and taking things for granted. And so I read the title as, it's careful when people are always giving you good feedback, because that opens you up to prideful certainty and then your own kind of propositional tyranny and your Luciferian intellect. And then you kind of get in that self-referential thinking you're right about everything. And there's something about other people objecting to you or resisting to you or calling you out or undercutting you or something that kind of knocks you off of that prideful moment and then allows you to reconsider or allows you to have another perspective. And so there's something about, negative feedback in your environment that's kind of necessary to cultivate a good spirit or a humble personality or a good member of the community. And I think a lot of in modernity, we're just giving everybody positive feedback, and therefore there's no negative feedback. And so then there's these weird sort of prideful Luciferian intellects of people that just ramble on and on, looks at himself. And so it's like kind of difficult to relate to people sometimes. And so I don't know, that was me projecting, and I wanted to offer that up to see what other people thought.
I had thoughts from what was the guy's name? Lou.
Lou. Lou.
Lou is just, I mean, if you're listening out there, Lou, I want to dialogue with you a little bit. You said you were going to be out there, but it's just like the question of what is rational thought. Like I make rational choices. Is there no like this the frame that there's like I don't submit to a priest, therefore I make independent, but like do you submit to your doctor? Like that's like and do you submit to the peer-reviewed the peer-reviewed structure and institution of academia that all comes down to, like, is there, or is it just like I make it like or when we make that choice, do I eat less cholesterol, or do I get on this pill, or do I not, or like those are those questions. And like it's like there's a trust in that. I don't know if he goes to the doctor and maybe he's like completely none of that's real, I guess, and just the question of is the story like if he trusts like rational thought of like let's say the History Channel circa 2005, like stories of history, like are you embedded in that story, and is that the rational truth? And of course it's objective because it's a third person talking about what people have researched, and there's no agendas, there's no things behind that, if the agendas are only in the religious space, those kinds of questions, I guess. And like he even quoted, let your yes be yes and your no be no. Like, and I think it's great. It looks like he's like living that out. And the interesting thing about, I guess, my question for him is, after 12 years, does the previous, I don't know, I don't know how he's in his 40s, 50s, 60s, like, are the last 30, 40, 50 years that he was a Christian, is it just gone? Like, that doesn't inform any decisions. He's not submitted to any embedded wisdom within that history of his life. It's just like gone. And those are things I'm curious about in relationship to that. And but I loved what he said about going through the wall of doubt and disbelief, because I mean, and he's on the other side of it, and he's experiencing like some true freedom, and I think that that's real. And I'm just curious if it's completely disconnected from his previous parts of his life. And I liked, because he said something, I used to like labor over these prayers, and I don't know what kind of like religious background he came from, but like, God, just show me your will, just show me your will, God and just, and just. And I kind of wonder, like, Peterson had a really great thing that stuck with me, which was, if you want to get an answer to prayer, just simply pray, God, what have I done wrong? And I think that that's like, you want to know the will of God, just respond to that, and I don't think you have necessarily believe that you're praying to God, but it'd be an interesting experiment for Lou to, like, if that's like a conscious practice of like how he thinks through, like, is that what he's thinking? Is that considered a type of prayer when he's like, making a choice, like, I'm making this choice and I'm going to like, let it be what it is. Those were just some of the thoughts I had on what he was talking about.
Sorry, my son came in and talked to me, so I didn't hear it.
Can you stop with these relationships that don't matter anymore now that you're part of the TLC, Luke? Jeez, you're really taking away from like the connection and the love that we have here. And I think it's actually like dangerous, to have these sort of like relationships that are intruding upon a live stream like this. And
like family.
I think I speak for everyone in the TLC that you need to stop talking to your wife and children.
I'm working on it, one step at a time.
Yeah. I mean, I whatever. I'll just jump in here of like, I mean, I'm sure his answer, because I agree with Christian's line of thinking, but his answer would just be like, well, I trust, I trust the doctor, or the doctor's an extension of my will. And, he's just doing what I want. And I think that like, you have to answer these questions of like, who are you? What are your desires? Like, that's not a static thing. And the idea of like, well, okay, you're making a decision, and then you say at some arbitrary point, okay, what do I want for lunch? Oh, a sandwich. And then you cut it off and you say like, okay, well, if it turns out later that I really just wanted like a salad, I'm not going to beat myself up for it. It's like, you're deciding those are the parameters of like, I'll think about what I want for lunch for 2 minutes and then I'll do it. And like, but that's an arbitrary line where you said like, I'm going to stop thinking about it now. In the same way, like, oh, should I donate money to charity? There's an arbitrary line in which you say like, okay, I'm going to stop caring about these starving kids in Africa. And like, you have to negotiate with yourself. Like, okay, you can say like, well, I just will only care about myself, but you have to be worried that one day maybe you'll wake up and be like, I am alone. I have, I only care about myself. I have no relation. And you have to like change that part of yourself. So like just saying like, oh, there's me, who I am, and I just go around making decisions and I just put a timer on each decision and what to care about and what not to care about. Like there's no one static you. I mean, you can just look at the science. There's no just like, well, there's me in a test tube and then we'll optimize for me, like who you are and who you care about and your friends, your family, your community are all extensions of yourself. And
I mean, my simplest way of answering both my title and Lou's question, I think these are related, is I think the choice is between self-emptying or not. And that's related to self-control. Like, are you going to self-empty for the other, either in, and you could do it on either side of the line. This is why I love that flippin' movie Silence so much, because the two priests do opposite things, and I think they're both faithful. I love that movie. It's like perfect, because so in self-emptying, part of your self-emptying could be the kind of martyrdom. And this is very, I mean, I'll just speak from, the Christian perspective and my perspective. Like, the Father John Bear said this, and I love it. Like, I think somebody asked him when it came to it's such a baller response, but like somebody was asking him the culture war question of affirming when it comes to like LGBTQ stuff or not. And he said, the call of the Christian is to die. And I was just like, hell yeah, Father Bear. Just stick people with that. Put that in your pipe and smoke it. Don't give them what they want. Just tell them the bigger truth behind like which side of the line you're on. And I think that's true, because you can, I think there's a way, let's just use silence as an illustration, that like Father, I don't know, which the Adam Driver priest in the movie, like he will not recant his faith. He will not step on the fumi. He will not do anything. And they're torturing the Japanese. They like bind them all up and take them out in a boat, and they're just like dropping them into the ocean to kill them, to try to coerce the priests to recant their faith. And Adam Driver just like swims out in the ocean. He's trying to save the parishioners, and he ends up just like drowning with them. He won't recant, and he ends up drowning with them, trying to save them. From a Christian perspective, tragically beautiful, wonderful, great, fantastic. God bless you, memory eternal. And then the other priest, spoiler alert, at the end of the movie, as he's in a blackened cell, and he can hear, which he thought were animals for a while, the tortured screams of his parishioners who are hanging upside down over pits of feces and dead bodies. And they put a little cut behind their ear so they can bleed, so that they don't pass out with the blood rushing to their head. And they're just making sounds, ungodly sounds. And the guys are basically just like, step on the fumi and we'll take them out. And he asked the question there, what does faithfulness to God look like? And he goes, and then this is one of the only pieces of art that's ever taken my breath away. I was reading in the books. I read the book first in preparation for the film. And again, not everybody has this happen to him. God speaks in a lot of different ways, including inside your own head sometimes. But Father Rodriguez hears, he doesn't even say, but he hears Christ say, step, step, trample, trample. It's for this reason I came into the world. And he steps on the fumi, and he recants, and he apostatizes, and then there's like some fallout for the rest of the book. But like he denies Christ in obedience to Christ. Now there's going to be a lot of people that hear that just drives them crazy. I don't know. Take it up with Shizuko Endo, I guess, or Scorsese, or me, I guess, because I think it's also beautiful. And like, here's the thing, like even that, like I'll say that to someone, and woe to you when everybody speaks well of you, because there's tons of Christians who will hear that and just be super annoyed that I said that. Or there are people that are say it's casting pearls before swine, or it's whatever. And then like, what's the tension between saying what you really think and discerning that you should say your opinion, or shutting up? And what is the appropriate moment for it? Like it's the same with the priests, should they, like, when to be silent and when not to be silent, and how do you discern that? And when should you voluntarily self-empty and submit to to someone else's opinion out of love for them? And when should you stand firm? There is no right answer.
Can I jump in?
Yeah.
I love everything you're saying. And like I've always something Christian and I talked about is like, I'm very lovable, and I basically just want everyone to love me. and I want to
Yep.
love everyone else too. But that's kind of been my MO for most of my life, is this beautiful yet maybe a little bit infantile like need for attention constantly. And it wasn't until, you know, I started like dealing with my shit that I started going to like 12-step groups, counseling, one-on-one therapy, and I developed a little bit of a spine and a little bit of like willingness to maybe even some resilience in being able to exist in relationship with people and in conflict. And that was like so painful to get to that point. But I then, you know, in the last, I think, year or so, I came across this jazz term called antagonistic cooperation, where it's a way to describe what happens in an improvisational environment, where, for those of you who don't know jazz, there's like everyone oftentimes will play a classic song like a jazz standard. You play the melody together. Everyone's playing over the same chords. You're playing the same thing. And then you go around and like let people solo. And during that solo, you're like one-upping each other. You're quoting each other. You're putting each other down. You're like making fun of each other, all just like musically, harmonically. And when you have that sort of antagonistic cooperation happen, it turns into a mystical experience. And then when everyone returns to the head, to the top of the song and plays it all down together, it's like, oh my God, we like went to heaven and then like came back to earth. And all of a sudden, like earth means something.
Yeah, no, I think that's a beautiful illustration. And I was giving you shit because this is a Donald Miller book that you read this in Blue Like Jazz.
Did
But it's
I?
kind
Did
of no.
Oh
I
my
think
God.
but like his whole point, like what you just said, is like
Yeah.
the central illustration of that book. more or
Okay,
less.
I'm sure that book is trickling into my subconscious. I mean, yes, that was a very
But that's a very old, like, I mean, I don't know when that book came out. Like, it probably came out in the dang 90s. I don't know how old it is. When did Blue Like Jazz come out?
Early
But-
2000s. Early.
Yeah.
Early 2000s.
Yeah, it was part of that emergent. It was one of. It
Right.
was like the book. I feel like
Right.
that got.
And
got-
it's
it was,
good.
It was good, and it was credible to Baptists who were the people I was hanging out at the time, and they're like, "Ooh, this is good. It makes me feel a little uncomfortable."
To the liberal Baptists.
Him and Shane Claiborne.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. It's a, no, I think it's a great illustration. And that's kind of like, but again, that's to make space for somebody else to riff is self-emptying. You
Yeah.
have to shut off the masculine assertive energy of like, this is what I think, this is what I feel, like this is my prophetic voice. Like you have to shut up for the other people to play for a while, and then you come back in harmony and all that. That's why, I don't know, that's why I think all this, I mean, I talk about it on my live streams all the time, but I just, hospitality is like the way of, that's like relational jazz.
hey,
You know.
freaking men! Dang it!
Now I'm trying to make space for C Money. Do you write notes all the time? I see you writing over there, and I'm just like, are you just, it's like writing notes?
Sometimes, yeah. Yeah, I write notes down. I think of ideas. I think of things that you guys have said and stuff that I find interesting. But then I forget the relevance of it by the time it's my point to talk. So it's not really that helpful.
Maybe if we'd shut up more so you could riff.
Yeah, that might. Well, you know that we all need to do that. But I get on my roles too that are pretty distracting for other people. So we gotta work in community here. It's a practice for all of us apparently.
Community is a practice.
Definitely.
I
Well,
love
that's
that.
part of my like thing I was wondering with Lou. You know, he's just like, I don't listen to other people's opinions, and I just have my own opinions. And Lou, if you're still here, like this is one of the questions I would have asked you. And then I'm just like, but like, why do you watch my streams? You know, like and that's part of my, like, I get it. Like, I get it. a lot of what he's saying is really resonant with that. Like I was holding up my picture here of, I think it's a Norman Rockwell of like each according to the dictates of his own conscience. Like that's what it says on the top of it. And or it's that Cormac McCarthy quote that I love because I love all things Cormac. And it's but like it's always himself the coward betrays first. After that, all other betrayals come easily. And it's like if you can't, because that's the thing. If you don't really, in a Dostoevsky sense, or in like a, which I think Peterson's talking about, if you lie to yourself, if you become such a codependent doormat that you don't even know what you think, you can't even voluntarily submit to someone else's opinion because you don't even know what you think. You've lost so much of your own particularity and individuality or whatever, like that you don't even know what you think in order to submit to someone else. You can't even have self-control because you're relationally possessed by the big other or whatever, you know? And so you have to have that own relational jazz within yourself that you even know what you think so that you can choose to submit it to the other or to be the prophetic voice crying out in the wilderness that everybody wants to kill, you know?
I think there is something to Lou's point about agency, personal agency, that's even making the choice to hop on a live stream and show your face to the internet or to a bunch of Christians. Like I think all that is real. And we're, the way the world continues, and you brought this up earlier in the conversation, in your monologue about scale and growth, and like, as things scale, like we lose agency as people, as persons, in that part of our locus of person, in the way that you sometimes describe it. And I think that's kind of a part of what this is, and even maybe what like is drew Lou in or whatever, like, is being able to make this choice to think out loud, you know, together. And I mean, I'll say this isn't a judgment, this is just a curiosity, but like if you've been away from church for 12 years, even if you don't believe that the God above the church is real, like being with the people's real, and I would be hungry for it. I know that I went through 3 years of basically feeling like I was alone. Like, I don't know if I got a text from a friend for like 3 years. And like, and the day that I asked that question is like, does anybody care about me? I got 2 texts. That was like, and so
you texted everybody that question?
No, I just was, I was like thinking it, like praying it or something. I don't know. And so I think that like, I would be hungry for that. I'm still hungry for that. I mean, that's part of why I'm here, you know? So I think that I don't know if that's not like, I can't know much about Lou. I get that may be the first time he came up, but like, if you've been out of that community, that's kind of like the part like that I kind of was pressing on about, you know, does the previous 40 years of your life after 12 years, is it just like, it carries nothing? Like it didn't inform anything. It, you know, and that part is dead and gone. It's like, it's hard for me to fathom that as a reality for any human on any situation. So,
yeah, I mean, I think he has a legitimate point in like the way that I would affirm what Lou is saying and agapeing the hell out of it, finding the truth in it. Cause I think what he's saying is true, is that you can't be a coward and betray yourself. You can't be excessively codependent with the external. You have to know really what you think if you're going to submit to some external authority. You know, you have to know all that stuff. But yet, on the other side of it is no man is an island. Like, just to say that he's just making all these choices himself without any sort of relational influence is, I think, logically ludicrous. You know?
Yeah. That's the part, that's the meat bags floating through space is hard to like square that there isn't something happening in our consciousness and relationality. You know, obviously that's a big part, many mapped territories in this space upon such things, but
yeah. I mean, there's a lot of unhealthy pressure to sacrifice yourself in ways in Christian communities. And
Oh, it's huge. It's huge.
Yeah, it's
That's
huge.
that's an oppressive spirit
Yeah.
principality, I think.
Of
And
scale.
so one of my subversive obediences to my intuition, I'm just pulling back the curtain here, you guys.
Let's hit it. Let's hit it.
And this is especially the case in orthodoxy, in convert orthodoxy. Everyone's coming in. You know, I was there. You're trying to figure out what you're supposed to be doing. You're looking around, and it's like everyone's like really into obedience and like, and 10 years later, 15 years later, it's like something's not working. And okay, so what I've decided to do, this is my experiment, is I'm like the official organizer for our church talent show. And so this is an opportunity for people to just structurally draw attention to themselves just for a second. Okay. This doesn't have to be like sipping from the devil's cup. It probably feels like it to some people. But I think that if people can just season their lives with a little bit of self-expression, they can actually bring their self to a community in a way that they can't otherwise. And it's this weird like paradox. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to become, I don't know, like
Martin Shaw, another recent Orthodox convert at Symbolic World, said, it might be okay to be famous for 5 miles, like basically to be known.
Yeah.
To be known, and to be known for what you have to offer, like you're saying. Like, I think that is true.
And I think there's it's risky, because then once you're known, I mean, that's the paradox of like this life as a human being, is like the more I'm known, the more I can be rejected. And but taking that step is so healing. It has been for me.
Yeah, that's a Brene Brown vulnerability piece, right? Because that's, I mean, I think on one hand, like the deeper levels of relationality, I think have to do with are almost the feelings thing. Because it's one thing to be vulnerable and tell people what you think about ideas, right? Like I can come on and talk about whatever I talk about in universalism, and people might get mad. That's one thing. That's one kind of thing that hurts. But then, like, to tell, like, if you're married, to tell your spouse, what up, Mark? Like what you're really thinking, what you're fearful, what you're insecure about in your relationship. Good fucking luck. Like,
Yeah,
that's balls right there. Mark, what's up?
Yes.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, buddy.
I just wanted to be on TV on one of the most famous channels on the TLC.
Oh man, it's a big deal.
I made it.
You made it.
I saw you on what? I feel like you've been making the rounds. What stream were you on recently? Because I mean, I try to keep up on my TLC homework. This is both.
I've been trying not to go on too much because I run out of stuff to say. But I was on. I don't even remember the guy's name, but I went on one of his streams last night. I just subscribed to his channel, and it was pretty small, but it was a real good, like, 10-minute conversation. And I like talking to Mark Parker whenever he has a stream.
Mark's
he was kind of one of my first actual friends I made on TLC. So yeah. But yeah, Lou was interesting coming in. It's tough. When you come in with a bunch of Christians and say something that's maybe unchristian, it's like there's something about Christianity that makes people extra opinionated. So of course everybody's going to talk about that. But I think everybody was like pretty nice to him, and it seemed like he was in good faith. And one thing that stuck out to me is that it seemed like he was praying for years and years for guidance from God, right? Is what he said. And then all of a sudden he had some sort of realization that he can make decisions himself. And I mean, that actually sounds like a pretty big answer to a prayer, you know?
I agree.
Yeah, it's a good insight, buddy.
Because, yeah, I definitely in my life had about 20 years when I left Christianity. And the Christianity that I was in was very boxed in. Everything was explained by acceptable and unacceptable answers, pretty strict. And I like fell out completely. And there were times in that where I felt so liberated and like I can make all my decisions, you know? And I'm not saying that he is like me. There's certain things about me that, you know, not everybody shares, of course, but with me, like I would hit walls to where I would just cry out, like, I have no freaking clue what to do. And I always looked up to people like Lou that just had that confidence of, you know, they're going to make, because I seem to go pretty well for a while, just trusting my own intellect and rationality. That's one thing he said is rational decisions. But after a while, for me, and I'm not saying that he's like this, I really am not, but for me, after a while, my rationality does not cut the mustard anymore. And I almost needed to, like, now that I'm like back in church, it's like there is really, Christianity is just so confusing, especially now with the internet, where we can like interact with all these different ideas, you know. It was better when you were just in your denomination that you grew up and your whole family believed the same thing. It's like we don't have that luxury anymore. We actually have to wrestle with different ideas, and it sucks. But it's
right,
actually,
but it's just growth, right?
I think it's part of the walk.
Right.
You know, you have to with it, and I wrestle with this stuff, but I have to give myself a rest because when it comes to these issues, I have to sort of study them. If it's messing with me, I have to look at it, try to look at it honestly. There comes a point where it's like, okay, enough. I don't need to know. You know, I don't need to know that. And I can just know that I have faith in God. And in the end, that's what saves me. You know, even though that all this other stuff matters, but my faith is the most important thing. And
yeah, I think that's completely legitimate, Mark. Like, I don't. It's an often said thing in this TLC space is like speaking intellectually and theologically and philosophically about God is necessary for you if it's necessary for you. And if it's not, don't do it. You don't need it. That's fine. Like nobody has to. I think that is a little bit of the myth, I think, of the delusion of the rationalist strains of Christianity is like you think you have to know like what is the most factually true, rational, objective position on every theological point of doctrine. Good luck. You know, like it's not going to go well for you. But I also want to say I'm going to leave this in your guys' great and willing hands, and I am just going to listen in and go away. And so either Tayo has admin privileges, I think, if he wants to do stuff with it, he can, or else you guys can just all leave and whenever you want to.
I think thanks, Luke.
Yeah.
I think that the thing about, you mentioned the knowing every doctrinal confession dot and tittle is a little bit like harken back to Peterson's ideas about facts. Like there's so many facts in the world that we can't do it all. And to Lou's point about like trust and submission, I'll take it back to that the illustration related to medicine. Like there are so many facts about medicine that even the best Google doctor, you know, and even using AI in the way that you would try to, being able to engage with it as an individual is going to be a fool's errand to try to understand. You don't have context for physiological processes. You don't have context for dynamics with drugs. And so, you can get some ideas and it helps you ask good questions, but submitting to the authority and of your doctor or of a hospital or something like that, even to a nurse, like is you are deferring to a large group of facts. And so, but yet we believe this I think this false idea that because we have the internet and because we have access to more and more information that we can take the priesthood upon ourselves, the priesthood of medicine, the priesthood of history, the priesthood of all of a theological and confessional ideas, and we can parse this thing out and find it and we can know. And I do think that in all these sectors, like we do defer all the time to people's knowledge and to people's expertise in that way, or their experience of having where they spend they spend way more hours a week thinking about this, and they spend a concentrated amount of time during school learning about theology and how that applies to life, psychology, medicine, all these things. And that, we find ourselves submitting to that all the time. And I think that's one of the ideas of deferring, and even in like the TLC space of something about the hive mind and the collective consciousness, like being able to work through ideas together. You are submitting to other people's perspectives and insights and gaining from that. I've got nothing else.
I gotta get going. This has been a great chat.
See you, Roger.
I'm supposed to be at work ushering in the next worldview, so gotta get back to that.
Yeah.
Even though that's happening here. All right. See you guys.
It's probably a good time for me to go too. It's nice chatting with you guys.
I see money. Good to see you in face. He was engaging in the live chat on mine and Rigel's conversation yesterday.
Yeah.
It was cool.
Right.
I saw Hunter, welcome, Metamodern Mystic. I think I've seen you in these spaces.
Yeah, thank you. It's great to meet you, man. I've seen you a good number of times now. Yeah.
Cool. I was just gonna look at Afriel. He said, with the medical system, you're also deferring to a corrupted educational complex.
Oh,
yeah. And then that's to every there's corrupted institutional complex of religion. Yet that is every institution is corrupted by our ness, and yet we are dependent upon them. And so I think that and we that's the human reality, and it's not separate. I think someone was talking about the immaculate conception of peer-reviewed work earlier, and I'm like,
right. It kind of reminds me of who was it? I think this was about John Wesley, maybe. It was something about so and so laid hands on the so and so, but who laid hands on him? The immaculate conception of peer review. It's like, well, who peer reviewed that idea?
Yeah. Or apostolic succession of peer review.
Right. Yeah, so similar shape here. To me, it's the mental health side of things, and it's the legal corruption that I think is most significant, because people are deferring to supposed mental health experts, and the number of people doing that is growing at an insane rate and has grown at a crazy rate over just the past few years, especially since COVID. And these people are all legally obligated not to tell you anything that might get them in trouble. And these are the new priests. And the law can change at the drop of a hat. The APA can rewrite their books. And just like that, 20 million therapists will tell you, and you'll think that you're in service of your own sovereignty and your own health to accept what they tell you. That's the part of it I see as concerning.
Yeah, that's why I think part of the answer is dialogue back with the religious institutions from things that have been divorced, such as the confession, which is, therapy or whatever, like that needs to be in conversation. It's not going to be all of a sudden everybody's, going to their priest again, even though I think that's good if people do start going to, in a way, like, but that there's going to also have to be a dialogue in the other, religious spaces with those places. Grim, what's up?
I like Hunter's point because it highlights how, in the last century, we were really concerned about physical wars, and so the scientists and the bomb makers became priest class, and now the war is the mental landscape. So it makes sense to see the shift to that being the priest class. That's a nice catch.
I like that. That's also the Peterson-Dawkins conversation about the abstraction from the physical war into the mimetic war. And I'm hoping that gets the mimetic war turns into mimetic conversation and mimetic dialogue. That's a transcendent part of that.
That brings to mind the interesting notion that we aren't really allowed to go to mimetic war with the Chinese. I mean, we could just attribute it to the language barrier, but even without the language barrier, they're isolated, isolationists, the way that the United States was isolated from the rest of the world.
Like pre-World War II, or in a way?
Well, because us being way over here and all of the armies of Europe being in Europe, like that, except it's the mimetic armies and the information flow, and they're siloed off, locked down on their WeChat or what have you, thanks to the virtue of being a totalitarian state.
This is a tree Grim.
You're free to believe that.
I'm an American.
It is the American vote is the most valuable vote to influence in the world. I mean, it's
if you count the
mimetic targeting.
If the vote is the dollar spending, not the actual vote, yes.
Well, I think that plays at the margins, but the underlying
the American actual vote is pretty worthless.
No. I think the money only plays at the margins. You can't just spend $1 billion and convince the Americans to go conquer Canada. Wait, well, usually,
you
at any other time in history, that would have been a thing.
For $1.95, sir. We would do it for $1.95.
No, we could have done it 1945. Whole world if we'd wanted it. But the population of America wouldn't have been 3 years earlier been yeah, we got to go stop Hitler because racism is evil and we believe in freedom. And 3 years later, they're going to be well, now that we've got the bomb, how about we just conquer the world? Well, I don't think they would have swallowed it.
Winning hearts and minds instead.
Mm-hmm. See, that's why I think if you're gonna let your kids play video games, the Civilization series is a good one because it walks you through human history, and one of the options is a cultural victory. It's if everybody's an American because of the media, it doesn't really matter that they're in a foreign country, right? The Blue War when the wall fell.
I don't know what happened to Teo, but he was the one with the admin privileges, so no one can highlight comments and such, but McMo had a nice one. It said it used to be the Gears of War. Now it's the semiconductors of war. Oh, somebody does have hands on.
He's backstage, he said in the private chat.
Oh, I missed it. There it is, the little red dot. Yeah.
So, Hunter, does anybody know you? Who are you? What kind of home did you grow up in?
Oh,
nobody knows me. I was born in a. What's that?
First time on the fourth wall.
I think that's right. Yeah. I was born in a family united by politics and divided by religion. My father was a Southern Baptist Republican politician, and my mother was a Mormon Republican politician. and we were homeschooled. So that influence was exacerbated in that sense. And I was the third of 5 children. How's that?
How Mormon did you go? Did you?
I was a missionary.
So, like, you know about the magic underwear, and that if you
know about,
and
I invent it. Well,
and also that you get you get to be the god of a planet if you do it right.
A universe, a planet. That's small potatoes. That's the demiurge's trick. If you got a planet, that's the psyop.
Damn.
Alan, you're pretty and haven't said anything.
Oh, Grim, batting your eyes at me. No, I just wanted to jump back on. This is a good conversation. I agree with you, Grim, about like, you know, people in Finland care more about American elections than they do about Finnish elections. Like, there's only one government, let's be real. But that's neither here nor there. The thing I want to jump back on to talk about was one of the themes earlier with Luke and Shane was just talking about like love and like being, we have this very like, we haven't really fleshed out this conversation on like being intimate and being close, and like sort of we have this TV version of like, well, if you just sit down your wife and you just look her in the eyes and say like, I love you, and like I'm open to any of your emotions and I will receive them and we will talk them through, and then you'll take my emotions on, like that is like not love. That is not you being loving to your wife. That is not initiating a home of openness with your like you have to like, love is such a bigger, more important concept, and like it means doing what is best, and like sometimes that's really hard, and sometimes that means correcting someone else, which we think is like the opposite of love. But you know, just to crack open that conversation of like, I think people think like, oh, well, being open and loving, you can just do it in 5 minutes. I'll just get my girlfriend in this room right now and tell her how much I love her and how much I'm open to her. And really, like, that's like looking at a video of someone dunking a basketball and being like, oh, I'll just dunk it right now. Like, what it takes to actually create those sort of bonds and connections, they run deeper than words. They're more complicated than just a sentence. And so like, if you really want to be a strong, loving, caring person who takes care of your friends and family and community, it's like watching that video of someone dunking a basketball. It could take you 10 years to learn how to do it. It could take you 50 years to learn how to do it. You might never be able to learn how to do it. And so don't just confuse the like, you know, because even Luke was talking about like, I don't think women really want to hear about your emotions. And it's like, well, it's really complicated. It's a really complicated question. And so don't just stop at this sort of like, you know, I mean, it's just the media is just so shitty about it, of like Phil Dunphy in Modern Family being like, I'm a doofus, but I love my family, and therefore I'm a good guy.
This is Peterson's point. Well, this is Peterson's point, citing Dostoevsky's point about man's refusal to become a piano key. And his idea is that if you really did make heaven and give man everything he wanted, he would rebel at having been solved and fixed. He would throw off and prove he was more than a puzzle to be answered and then done away with. But woman is the puzzle of the Sphinx, who has decided to throw it off even before you build the heaven. So if you think you've got the solution to just fix her, maybe it's right, but she's an alive thing and she doesn't want to be fixed.
It's true. All right. I just wanted to jump on. Good point, Hunter. Talk to you guys later.
Sometimes like being honest, like I think that is the tension of that we actually do have needs. And it's when that if it's a mutual, like if it is love, that when you are talking to the other person in the relationship, that there are times you have to actually advocate for yourself and to be known, to be cared for, because none of us are psychics, you know, yet, right, Grim? Sorry, but
no,
like
most of us aren't. You can say that. Just say
most of us
aren't psychics.
Most of us aren't psychics, you know, or high level empaths. So my wife is a high level empath, but it's like that being able to say, no, like I spent a lot of time not acknowledging that I actually had things that I needed in the relationship, thinking I was doing the right thing in a certain way. And then it would come out just really ugly months later, like in a form of resentment. And so I think that like it's important in a relationship, in a loving relationship of trust, to be able to acknowledge that there are certain things you might like need to be cared for about. And so anyways.
Yeah, you guys, like Alan came on and said all this love stuff, and now I have no idea how to participate in this conversation.
It's like that one game, Grizz. I don't know, Tomb Raider.
Oh,
Grizz, you've got a muse.
What?
Just talk about your muse. Pretend we're talking about our muses instead of women.
I am a muse. I don't get to have one. It's terrible. Terrible.
Really?
Your muse is your past self, Grim.
And
You're
what was the first one? A 2 of clubs? What does that mean?
Stephen has saints for him. I don't get to know what they mean. It's for the people that use those sorts of things to make meaning. It's not really about me.
Oh.
Although I get, everybody's got their relationships to the face cards and the jokers and the aces and stuff. So those feel significant when they come up. But like I just found out that the 10 of spades is the archangel Michael in our what do they call it? The panoply? No, the thing.
I suppose the 10 of spades.
Iconostasis.
10 of swords in the tarot tradition. 10 of spades would correspond to 10 of swords. Would that be right?
I can't. I don't want to associate the wrong one and throw people off a horrible track of divination and whatnot.
It's very interesting that you use the systems and you purposefully avoid learning how to use them.
I don't use them. I present them. I allow them to participate. I don't
Hunter, how long you been? So I thought I'd seen you in another stream, but this is like the first time you've like.
I was on with Paul.
Okay, Reese, yeah, and so you have broke the fourth wall before. This is like.
Oh, I thought the fourth wall was a more specific stream or something.
No, it's just like break the fourth wall when the person on the TV show like looks like the Jim Halpert.
Yeah, I get
looks
it.
at the camera, he's breaking the fourth wall. It's like, oh, this is something. This isn't just a screen and people are doing things on it. Like we're actually here together. Or beyond that.
Essentially, the fourth wall is behind which you are audience.
Yes.
So
Tyler apparently and I should talk or something.
It'd be fun.
So how long have you been paying attention to this corner of the internet?
I guess
not long, if that's what he thinks the fourth wall is.
2-ish years. 2-ish years. I've been paying attention to Peterson more or less since he came on the scene.
Yeah.
Oh, what do you got? Is that him on the poster?
That's him up there.
I have an appearance to make. I gotta go.
I'm making my own iconostasis of internet saints
to sort of provoke you into embodying the spirit better.
No, I'm not I'm not very good at being a mystic, but like I've been way too Protestant for that most of my life. But I think just it has more to do with like being a fan. Like, these people, they've helped me, and in that way, this is associated, like embedded in Paul Vanderklay's work, is like the conversation and the synthesis of these guys' conversations, and it's formed and shaped, and it continues to play a role, at least on my corner of the corner. Yeah, I was, but so if you were kind of raised, like, sounds like more like the practicing Mormon side, not just more, but you were raised as practicing Mormon. Like, where are you at now, and where and what role did Peterson play in all that?
I do want to comment on this. I feel like there's a sort of new era in the culture that we're participating in, where it's starting to go so fast
Yes.
that we participate in it without knowing what it is almost.
Yep.
And we haven't quite figured out what to do about that. So we're still just talking about it. But then at some point, hopefully we figure out, what do we do now that we've accepted that we don't know what to do?
Yeah. What do you do when the you can see like past all the walls that used to like separate us in physical life, in a certain way, and then it's just happening everywhere, everything everywhere all at once in the digital realm. That is a big time question. So what's
Lots
up,
of
Mike?
Spirits.
Hello. I thought it was a good time to jump in, hearing a little bit about Hunter's background, because I just put out a video about there's like an ex-Mormon influencer lady, and she made a video a couple weeks ago about how there's so many Mormons in like science fiction and fantasy, and like the Twilight Lady, and then like Orson Scott Card and Brandon Sanderson are like the two big ones that I was most familiar with. And so I made a video about it, thinking about like this kind of metagetical thing, because there's been like I would say alliance between Mormons and evangelical Christians in certain domains, like conservative politics. There's a lot of agreement, like being pro-life and things like that. But this metagetical framing that Paul's kind of been stirring up or whatever. The way I've been thinking about it, I just like wonder. I'm interested about like what the future is between those relations, and even like what the future is for like the Mormon Church, because it does seem like it has a capability to change rather quickly, and some of that direction has been more towards other streams of Christianity, I would say. But
I think that's right. I think the Mormons have a strange meta thing starting to go on. And by the way, my background, we actually didn't go to the church, the Mormon church, growing up. We always went to the Baptist. When I was 18, I decided I wanted to be baptized Mormon and went from there. But I had to subversively sneak a Book of Mormon at some point. Interesting. Yeah. But the Joseph Smith story is, he comes on the scene. He's like, none of you guys look like the New Testament, which is the thing. So we're doing the New Testament. And he's like, bam, we got angels, we got fiery spirits. We're building a literal temple right here. Moses came down and we got the whole 9 yards. And now here we are like 180 years later. And you could say the exact same thing to the Mormons, like not New Testament times, Joseph Smith times. Say, you don't look like that. You say you have miracles in the same way that every church still says they have miracles. They're like, it happens in these quiet ways that nothing ever convinces anybody with evidence anymore. We don't do that. We think that's not spiritual. A wicked generation wants a sign, that sort of a thing. But potentially the Mormon focus on, that's not the real spirit. This is the real spirit. And here's the whole story. And one day you're going to do this as a god. Maybe that's part of the sci-fi, the fantasy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, because I think that the big, like, so I did find one channel that I've been watching for a while, and it was a lady she's in the Mormon church, and then she just starts reading in her regular Bible, and reading in the book of James, where it says, like, ask the Lord for wisdom and he will answer you. And so she starts praying, and then, God just is pushing her to search out these things, mostly in the Bible, but then also looking through, and she's seeing some of these, discrepancies and things in different accounts from within the Mormon church. And basically she just like formulates, what I would say is like, she came to like the evangelical Christian understanding of like being saved by grace through faith from within the Mormon community. And then eventually, she and her husband and her family, moved out of it. But then she's kind of started this ministry online or whatever, making these videos and kind of like it's not the typical apologetic where you see like, here's why the Book of Mormon's false and blah blah blah. She's
Mhm.
saying like, okay, here's the things that you believe and these are good things, but this is how the church is actually misinterpreting it, and this
Right.
is, you know, what it really means, which is like, wow, that's, you know, to me, that's an interesting thing to
Well, it's
see.
perfect because it's meeting them where they are and in their own language, which is something I'm trying to learn to be able to do with every religion, all the main ones, I guess.
Yeah.
But with the Mormons, first, that verse is the Joseph Smith story. I found James 1:5. I thought I'd go pray. Jesus and God show up and tell me I'm the prophet.
Right.
But the Mormons, that's how they respond to everything. Is like, they're like, look, when you doubt, just remember, did you ever ask God and feel like God told you? Because if God told you, then even if logic itself says this is wrong, you just put that on a shelf and you wait to go to heaven, and there you go. But you meet them where they're at, and you say, look, I did pray to God. I did look for the Spirit and the fruits of the Spirit, and I want to hear you tell me that you have more of them. If that's what you're claiming is your basis for knowledge, if your knowledge, they're willing to say it for knowledge, but let's hear them say it all the way. If you have the Spirit more than anybody else in terms of knowledge, do you have it in terms of the other fruits of the Spirit?
Mm.
So you said you're kind of you're interested in like being able to for all religions to have conversations with each other. Is that what you said?
Yeah, the metamodern dialectic.
Yeah. Do you like, I'm curious about that, because is that so that there will be a, like, because I kind of agree with that on a certain level. I just think that we all are going to fall back into our cultures. Like, we're all going to fall back into, like, it's not like then there's a perennial culture beyond that's in a certain way like flat, but it's like kind of like Vervaeke's hallway, Lewis, you know, like there's a, like coming into this space right now, even just like in the meta sense of talking about Mormonism and evangelicalism, or like, and then you go back, you kind of come back down into these embodied realities and these previously built physical structures and networks and communities. And it's like having to exist within them and even continue to have conversation and faith and all these things. I think it's an interesting question, and one we're going to continue to see more and more of in the next few years.
Yeah, like my kind of question that I posed, and so there was a guy that's a Mormon guy, and he started commenting, and he reached out and said, like, you know, we could talk sometime. So I might, you know, I'll probably try to talk to him if I get the chance. But you know, like my kind of thought was like, I wonder if someday, like in the future, the Mormon church will be able to like take the Book of Mormon and say like, this isn't like, because I haven't studied it in depth, but I'm pretty certain like the like historical accounts of like what was going on in America prior to, you know, the Europeans coming over, it does not seem to really fit like the archaeological evidence and all this stuff. And
Oh,
you know,
you have little
whereas
faith.
well, okay, I mean, sure, you know, anything.
Haven't you heard about the 10 Commandments written in Hebrew that they found in South Dakota or something like that?
I didn't hear about that one. What kind of Hebrew was it? Like Paleo Hebrew or Babylonian script?
Did it have the vowel dots on it, or were there no vowel dots? I think that's the real question.
I forgot to check for the vowel dots.
Well, I mean, but I say like, because you know, so it's interesting because I'm thinking like, so like Brandon Sanderson especially. I don't know if you've read any of his stuff, but he's kind of got. Yeah, so he's kind of got this thing where like he's got many different series that essentially like take place on different planets, you know, and then but then they're all connected in this bigger like universe. So it's like an MCU kind of a crossover thing between these various shorter series that he's written. And he really, you know, through his work, he wrestles with a lot of like metaphysical things, you know, obviously because there's a lot of like what's the difference between like magic and science, and how does that kind of like different ways interact. And then and then he has concepts of like religion, and even how like can somebody who's a regular person, but imbued with power and immortality, becomes a more of a to be seen as more of a god figure over time. And so it seems like he's trying to like through fiction wrestle with these concepts and try to like make it work and almost I think figure out maybe where, and this is my projection, but where like the Mormon system fits in a wider, more pluralistic system, because obviously there are these mutually exclusive truth claims, and and so that's just either, and which is always pitting like sects against each other, and that was kind of like the game of modernity, like where there's one true church and all the other ones are false.
Well,
And
I would credit this to Christianity and Christ. I would point at all the martyrs who got themselves killed over apparently silly little doctrinal differences, but they were like, "No, I will die for this," and we're like, what happened to the human beings in this little pocket of the world where they all watched this one guy sacrifice himself? Now they're all getting themselves killed over the truth. Why are they getting the truth of all things? Why are they getting themselves killed over the truth? But then you run that forward 2,000 years, and we've got an awful lot of truth that no other like genealogy culturally did. Like it was the Christian line that did science first in the big way, so that's interesting. Nietzsche gives some credit to Christianity for taming the mind, right? It's like, I have to reconcile this contradiction about God, right? I could literally go to hell over this. So then you go all the way, and you tame the mind, and you tame the body through the mind, because the mind gets obsessed and terrifies the body potentially into submission. But this whole dialectic of the mixing of the stories that all become the one big story in the MCU and everything everywhere all at once. This is the metamodern mixing, I think. I sometimes say Hinduism is the original metamodernism, because they're all becoming gods, and now you've got all these gods, and it's like, who's the top god? And Peterson comes in and he says, well, what you do is you take all of the gods that give you enthusiasm to reflect on them, to remind yourself of them, to have icons of them. And enthusiasm, right? It means to be full of the Spirit of God. But he says each of these gods are minor gods that contain only a small piece of the true fullness of the Spirit of God. And supposedly when you mix them all together, you get to Christ. And so my thought is, a few like saints or philosophers do that ahead of the rest of us, but it doesn't really, they can't give it to us. We have to go through the same process. So in my mind, the metamodern thing is not the right answer. It's just the path we have to get to the other side and find the right answer. And according to people like Peterson, it's going to be Christ. But, the rest of the world has to look at that for themselves.
Yeah. So I mean, my statement that I said basically is, I wonder if, like, in 100 or 200 years, like, there will be a Mormon church that's more that views the Book of Mormon as like, this was a work of an imaginative work of fiction that's an important part of our story, that was part of our process to get there, even if it's not continuously elevated to the same level as other scriptures, or even I think that's what you see, because they have a magisterial tradition in their, like, ecclesial body that has this power to interpret things, that they've been reshaping the message to fit what seems to reflect the nature of reality, I guess you could say. Like, polygamy's in and then it's out, and there was some racist stuff and now that's not in there, and it seems like, and that's why I even said, like, because a lot of people were complaining about Brandon Sanderson, because so this is what I found was really interesting, because he's like he's liberal and he doesn't like the church's position on, like, LGBTQ stuff, but he's staying in, and he's like, well, I'm staying in because I believe in the church and I don't worry about that. And so it's like, okay, well, it seems like the Mormon church, maybe because they're isolated, they're a little behind the curve that a lot of the other churches are going through, so they may have to go through this, like, question with the same-sex marriage stuff, and then they'll emerge maybe at a I think there is like a similar place that a lot of people will arrive at more definitively, because it seems like other churches have been there, and now they're like going past that, and there's it seems like, to me, it seems like there's a little bit of a push back from the high point of that particular way of thinking about it.
Of the modern way of thinking, Michael.
Well, I mean specifically like on the simplistic, like, affirming view, like, just let everybody do, like, it's like, well, there seems to be a lot of consequences that came out of that didn't pan out the way people thought they would, or whatever. Which is why I see, like, there is, and this is why I say, like, it's not like, I don't think it's fruitful to put a culture war, like, dynamic of, like, are you for or against gay marriage? I think in, like, the meta modern thing, it's more that it's focused more so on the positive things, which is to say family in general. Like, that's why I think even, like, there's so much pro-natalist energy coming through a lot of different movements, the more secular ones and the more religious ones, that it's just like, oh wait, we've forgotten that, like, having marriage and children is such a central part of the formation of an individual, and because we didn't want to hurt the feelings of the people who thought differently, well, so okay, let's not worry about them, let's, like, let the majority of the people that are all going in this direction, like, let's just focus on the good of that. So like I think I see that as the way to, like, move past some of these issues. Like, people can still try their experiments, like, try it out in the real world, see how well it works. Like, does it lead to the same happiness? Does it lead to less? I don't know. But the thing about but that's even the thing. Just always, it's like these culture wars where one side must win over the other, and everybody has to submit to the one rule.
I think that's where the ossification comes from.
Yeah.
And when you're in the experimental mode, it necessarily makes the experimenter primary. So it puts the emphasis back on the people and the person. And theoretically, this is what Christ is all about. But yeah. I feel like I feel like our current paradigm has been trying to come up with the right answer, the right state or something. It's like there's a tree of knowledge that we want to, like, map out or something, but we seem to think it's a dead tree. We seem to think that once we finally get it, it'll just be there. It'll be still, it'll be done, it'll be right, and it won't grow, and it won't be like a burning bush, and it won't be like a tree, it won't be like a vine, it won't be like a wind that you can't figure out where it's going or anything like that. No. Well, that's the trick of the knowledge of good and evil, is it tricks you into thinking you'll finally finish getting it all done, and then you can go back to Eden. It's like, there's no going back to Eden. You will never be done. You have to just learn to live in the fire, and then you get the fruit cocktail of both trees.
I don't even have good answers or good response. It's not an answer, but I don't have a good response for that. I do think that there's a lot of, okay. I guess the only thing that it actually made me think of was the New Jerusalem, and that there's a garden in the middle of the city, and that, like, idea eschatologically. And that was actually we talked. Luke brought this up earlier in the conversation about Paul Kingsnorth's conversation with Jonathan Peugeot. I actually listened to most of that this morning, or all of it, and we talk about these ideas about civilization. And it made me think about, it actually made me think of Central Park in New York City, and how actually interesting that was as a concept. Not saying that New York's like the bastion of the New Jerusalem idea or anything, but just it came to my mind whenever he talked about having a garden in the middle of the city. And that the stones, Peugeot said that the stones on the edge of the city were made by Techne. So it's not like these things aren't, because he was having that dialogue with Kingsnorth about Techne and civilization, like should civilization die so that the true thing can be rebirthed or born again or whatever. It's interesting. I was surprised how interesting it was, and it kind of helped me. I kind of skipped the whole King's North first things conversation, but because this kind of distilled it a little bit into that conversation. But that's kind of what that brings up for me. I don't know how to like dialogue with it very well on like on its continued existence, but I do think also one of the things that just kind of keeps coming up for me with I guess like in the conversations that I've had in the meta modern spaces, it is hard for me to like the meta does have to happen. The metagelical thing has to happen first, actually. Like that's the thing that I think that I keep rubbing up against is like, okay, say you're right. I don't know. I don't maybe think it is on some level of me, like that there's a thing like I probably will continue to be Christian till I will be Christian until I die. But it's like even in my name, I will be Christian until I die. So it's like I can say that in full truth. So there's like that the thing that is I think happening that I know Michael's picked it up with me. We've both been kind of like toying with this because I think Michael's book really is kind of a good connection to this whole idea, even though he kind of put it out before Paul dropped that the phrase or whatever. But I think our conversation really circled around that, and that the thing that's happening with Protestants becoming Orthodox and what happened when the boomers all became boomer Catholics all became Protestants 60 years ago. Like we are seeing the full circle of that right now, because I just was watching it was like a TikTok on YouTube Shorts or whatever. You know how these things all are just like everywhere. And it was a very, very high divine liturgy. And I think it was, from my little understandings, it seemed to me that it was as grand as having like the Metropolitan, like it was like a big service. I could be completely wrong, but it seemed that way. But underneath it was a track of chant with like a professionally produced track of chant. It wasn't the chant that was in the actual service happening. So you were being given this high view with this great sensorial audio that is being produced on Pro Tools or Logic or GarageBand, then being like thrust back into, we are the ancient ones. Like that was actually the meme was like ancient, or the handle was ancient faith. So
coming in over the loudspeakers.
Yeah, they're using the iPhone shot on like imagine like 4K, and then it's and it comes through, and they're using this professionally produced version of Orthodox chant, and then you're getting this vision of Orthodoxy as, oh, I'm ancient, but you're getting it through this medium of that the evangelical church like mastered 20 or 30 years ago. And so it's like, it's just a very interesting time. And I'm not saying that to denigrate Orthodoxy. That's not my thing at all. I just think that we have to acknowledge that these things are all swimming together, related, and that the medium is the medium of exchange with our attention and with the technology that we're using is doing things. And and then we go. Then you go and you go to the Orthodox church down the road, and you're like, man, it wasn't actually as transcendent as that reel that I thought was just like, that blew my socks off. So,
it's funny. Like, so I found this on one's documentary or something about the Shroud of Turin, where they were like analyzing it, and they noticed that there was a certain like patterns of folds on it, and there's pretty good evidence from like the historical stuff. Once everybody forgets, like everybody got obsessed with the carbon dating thing, but there is evidence that like it was this known relic before like the Middle Ages, whenever it got rediscovered. And what they figured out was that it was most likely kept at this one church in Constantinople, not the Hagia Sophia, but another one. And what these folds were because they had it mounted in this like wooden or whatever, but like this mechanical contraption where at a certain like high point in the liturgy, it would actually like emerge from the floor of the like dais or whatever and be like presented, like I guess, you know, like they were gonna do the Eucharist or something like that. And it's just like it was like a 4th century megachurch light show or whatever. But you know, and just to think you know, I think we get so like we just get our like the aesthetic differences like color our ability to think through clearly about these things, where we're like old is good and new is bad. But like I don't know, people always been doing these things, and the point of it, and why would they do something like that? Because they wanted people to be more immersed in the experience, because they wanted their hearts and their emotions and everything to be directed to the central purpose of like connecting to God. And they didn't see that as a bad thing. They saw that as a good thing, that they made it more salient and, you know,
Totally.
impactful. So
I mean, isn't that kind of the whole point of like Christianity versus Buddhism? Christianity is like, with the right story, anybody can be enlightened, and it can happen.
Yeah.
Check out Paul. Check out this eunuch dude. Check out the Day of Pentecost. With the right story, anybody can be enlightened, and the hobbits often figure it out before the elves, and many of the first shall be last, and the last shall be first.
No one kneels to you, Frodo Baggins.
But yeah,
or no one. Or you kneel to no one. That was what it was. You kneel to from Aragorn.
Right. Aragorn. I mean, Aragorn is literally just the greatest Christian or second greatest Christian fiction writer of all times attempt to write a Jesus king. So like, it's pretty, I mean, who's better than Aragorn? What king depicted ever has ever been on Aragorn's level, you know?
The foolish shall shame the wise. Yeah. Well, guys, I'm going to have to hop off soon.
Oh, yeah. Go on. Sorry.
No, it's okay. I'm going to have to hop off. And I was told, I don't know if Teo's still backstage and who's manning the ship, but there he is. He's alive.
Final words, people. Final words. I'm shutting down when Christian shuts down.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Final thoughts. Lightning round.
Oh, you did. Oh, he said something that made me think.
The foolish shall shame the wise.
Oh, yeah. I saw these chaotic barbarian good character shorts on YouTube, where the chaotic good barbarian defeats these extremely like verbally confident and like dominant personality ghosts, banshees, vampires. And I'm like, this is an image for us in like, I don't know if it's 2 years or 6 months, but we are all about to be the barbarians. Like, we, the wise, are so used to all the foolish being like, you guys are so wise, we can't figure you out. We are all about to be the foolish. And that means that the wise will have to go, hey, foolish ones, how did you bear this? Like, geez, that was all I had going for me was the wise thing, and now it's gone.
Is that an allegory for the elites? Is that what you're saying?
Elites, yeah.
Sartori.
Well, these are just fun. I like this. This is fun. I'm so glad I get to talk to you guys.
It is fun, Mike. Well, I don't have anything insightful other than it's nice to meet you, Hunter. Hunter, it might be fun to have a 2-hour conversation sometime. So if you're interested, send me an email on my channel. It's my email.
Where can people reach you, or do you have a means of being contacted?
I guess my email.
You can email. My email's on my channel, and then
okay. Well, you email Christian, and then Christian, you should send him a copy of my book, or if you find my email, I'll send you a copy of my book.
Very nice. Yeah.
Cool. We'll get
Probably,
it
if
connected.
you want, if anybody actually wants to talk to me, you can just message me on Facebook, and I'll look up the message requests and I'll see it.
All right, we could go
That's
that
my
way.
name, so there it is.
Hunter Glenn. That's a very poetic name. All right, man.
It was really great to meet you.
You guys. I'm
Thanks.
getting out of here. Bye, everyone. Thanks, Hive Mind.
See ya.